Dear listeners, welcome to this podcast. This podcast will be divided in 3 parts. The first one is what it takes to actually learn a language. So the whole ecosystem of the process of learning a language, the factors, and everything that's inherent in the learning process of a language, of a new language. The second is the fallacy of the fluency, and that will deal with fluency, what is actually fluency, what it takes to achieve fluency, the possibilities, the practicalities, and the fantasies as well. Therefore, the fallacy of the fluency. And lastly, the last part is called Beware the Polyglots. So let's jump right in and begin with the first part, what it takes to actually learn a language. If I would learn a new language, before I even start, I have to ask myself a very important question, and I need to answer it as clear as possible before I even adventure myself into learning a new language, which indeed is a big, long, and arduous adventure. So the question is quite simple. Why do I want to learn a language? Why do I want to learn this language? And if I cannot give myself a clear answer, which makes sense to me, then I shouldn't even try, because it will be, in practical terms, it will be a waste of time. Regardless of the waste of time, it will be an experience and I will learn a few things. Just to give an example, every time I tried and I began to learn a new language, I had this very easygoing attitude that I can do this in a matter of months because of my self-confidence and also my ignorance about about the language in itself, not so much about the process of the language. So let's put this way. There are 2 fundamental pillars that will define whether you will be successful or not in learning a new language. And these 2 fundamental pillars are passion or motivation, motivation, or even interest in learning a language. So this is to say, I am very passionate about this specific language. Not about learning, not passionate about learning something new. It is the object of learning, in this case, this specific language. So I have to be very passionate. I have to have a strong interest and motivation in learning it. And many things can trigger this. One can be the culture of this specific, the culture that is attached to this specific language, or the tradition, or the music, or sometimes even people that are attached to this language. Maybe I listen to a song, as it happened to me. Recently I listened to a Persian song, and to put it romantically, I fell in love with that song, and then a passion in me was triggered, and it gave me this interest. Maybe I want to learn this language, or I would like to learn this language to be able to understand this song and to sing it in the original language with a perfect accent, with a perfect tonation, and I want to understand what I sing. So I have a big passion, and that will drive the process of my learning. Before I step to the next fundamental factor, I'll just add a few notes on this one. That passion is a bumpy road. Motivation is a bumpy road because it will never be constant. Perhaps I shouldn't say never. Maybe there are people who can manage a constant and a steady flow of passion and motivation. They don't lose it. They keep it straight and steady for the amount that is needed. And by the way, when there is passion and motivation in learning a language, in my experience, is the easiest and quickest road to achieve success in this matter. The second one is, so the second fundamental pillar is the need or obligation. So compared to the passion or motivation, where there is no need, unless we create it, which we can also do that. But this is a specific need or an obligation. That's why I say also obligation. So you are in a foreign country, in a foreign culture, and you're working there, or you have your business, or you are married, or you just want to live in this country, or you have no other choice. I don't know. But there is this central need and obligation to learn it. Otherwise, you cannot communicate. So these are countries where you don't have a second or third language that you can communicate in, which is quite rare nowadays because everywhere you can find English speakers. But it is this need or obligation that will create this fertile soil which will give the fruit of your learning. So to conclude, if there is none of this, if on one hand there is no passion and no motivation, on the other hand there is no need or obligation in learning a language, and we are just, let's say, playing around, we are just half interested, we are just I don't know, imagining, oh, I could do this, it's so nice, or I just want to be famous by being a polyglot, or I want to learn it just to show it up. I would say it's quite impossible, because as soon as you start, you will have to rely on one of these two factors. Either you're passionate or you need to learn, because if you don't, you will struggle, you will face continuous difficulties, because communication is fundamental in all our relationships. So that's the first part. Then we continue towards the second, and that is a language ecosystem, in which we are going to deal with the interdependence of the language. So in what way is the language interdependent and also interconnected with all the other factors as culture, society, tradition, music and arts and literature, and also history. So there is no way we can exclude language and put it in this theoretical panorama in which it's all just about words and rules and kind of mechanize it and believe that we will achieve fluency or any deep understanding of the language. There is no way, because in fact, language itself is, if not a direct product, is absolutely interconnected. That's why the word ecosystem, with all these other factors that I just mentioned, like culture, tradition, history, literature. And language also has a kind of evolutionary line. So we are all aware that in any given country, let's take Portugal for example, the Portuguese that is spoken today, it is not the same Portuguese that was spoken, let's say 40 years ago or 60 or 100. Same with English, same with German, and the same with all other language. So language is adapting to the times, to the period in which we find ourselves, and everything else that's happening. So this is just an example to understand how sensitive is language to all the other factors. So when culture changes, when society changes, also the language changes. What I want to mean with this is that it's only to mean that it's interconnected with all these factors, so we can in no way avoid them or disregard them. Another aspect I want to mention is, now in a more practical sense, words. For example, words are connected to emotions and to experience. So in learning a new language, let's imagine two different scenarios. One scenario is you sitting at home at your desk and you are learning a new language. And you go through all this process of theory, and you're reading books and you're listening to people online teaching the language or talking about the language. And most of the times it's just the language. At least of what I have seen, it's only the language aspect. There is not so much of the culture background. There's not so much of the cultural, societal, historical background to kind of give you an idea of. When I mean societal, it's like talking about the mentality of the people that shapes the language, the way of thinking, which is directly correlated to the language. So in this scenario, we have this scenario, and then we have the other scenario where one is in place with the locals, and one is living with the people who speak this language. One has to interact with them. One has to live with them. One has to exchange with them. And now imagine all the living experience compared to that other experience, that in other scenario where we are just sitting on our desk and we are going through books and videos. So this is to say, for example, that it's in the second scenario, it's an organic scenario. And the way of learning that language, so we take two people. One person is learning at the desk, the other person is learning on the field with a life experience. And we can say they're both intermediate level. Even in this intermediate level, one of them it's organic intermediate level. And by organic, I mean that this intermediate level is a deep understanding. Even though it's intermediate, it has a deeper understanding of the language than the person who, with great efforts, of course, managed to achieve an intermediate level at a foreign language just from tools like computer, internet, and books, and researches and all of that. So words, emotions, and experience. The person who has experienced the life connected to this language, that language is much more, has gained roots. The words which are spoken are attached to emotions that were felt when this experience happened. Emotions that are felt in an exchange with people, emotions that are felt in the daily life that a person goes through learning that language. And this emotional aspect is quite non-existent in a scenario which is mostly theoretical. So let's talk a little bit about the process of learning. So more into the theoretical side now that I mentioned it so much. Process of learning is quite unique because each language has an order, has its own order. So depending also on who you are, what is your native tongue, each language, each extra language that you will learn, that you will acquire, according to your background, will have specific order. So you cannot apply the same order to all of them. Also, this is to say that each person has a unique learning organism. Some people have a great sound memory. Other people have a great awareness of image, so they have a good image or imagery memory. Other people are very fond and versed with words, so they rely more on written content. Other people are more relied on experience. They just want to go on the streets and they are more social, they're more extroverted, so to say. So each person has their own unique organism, and that's why the process of learning a language cannot be mechanized and then applied to everyone else. And that is one of the big problems with language schools and courses and all that. And that's why also some students have they learn quicker or better than others. Not necessarily because they have better abilities or not, just because that approach fits them better. Also, I didn't mention really this aspect which is so central. Learning a new language is literally growing a new member. Or if you would like to think it in other ways, it's literally opening like a new room in your mind. Or some people refer to it as a character. A new language is a new character. Indeed, is a new character. And not only that, the old character. So when you start learning a language, you are a certain kind of person with certain characteristics. And when in the process of learning a new language, you have to sacrifice a lot of that old self in order to gain a new self. This is not to say that you have to leave the old self behind in order to gain a new self, but there will definitely be this sacrificial factor in it. Practically speaking, one has to put great effort and discipline into it. So apart from learning the language in itself, one actually improves him or herself to a degree that is quite visible to how I began, where was I when I began, and where am I now. So you literally develop you grow, you have new branches, and the mind expands to a completely new way of thinking and of seeing the world. All right, this is all for now, and we will continue on the next one with the fallacy of the fluency. Thanks for listening, and I would appreciate some of your feedback.